Let's talk about menopause. It's a biological process that about half the people on this planet will go through. So you'd think we'd all know about it, right? Well, for so many, it's still a complete mystery. Today, we're going to break down the 5 most important things you really need to know, and it all starts with one pretty shocking number.
90%. Just let that sink in for a second. What do you think that number represents? It's not the percentage of people who get a specific symptom or even how many look for treatment. Nope. It's something much, much more fundamental to the whole problem.
So that 90%? It's the number of postmenopausal people in a 2021 UK survey who said they had learned literally nothing about menopause in school. Nothing at all. And that brings us to the very first thing everyone should know. This isn't some personal secret. It's a massive systemic gap in our education.
And here's the crazy part. We're talking about something that directly impacts half the population of the entire planet, but we treat it like it's some obscure niche topic. How can something so universal be so poorly understood?
Well, it becomes a mystery because we just don't talk about it. We don't teach it. And that silence, it creates this huge vacuum. And that vacuum has very real and often very negative consequences.
And look, those consequences, they're not just some abstract idea. They are severe. This isn't just about not knowing a few facts. It's about the serious toll it takes on people's health and their lives. Which brings us to the second big thing to know. Being unprepared for this comes at an incredibly high cost. One single word. When those people in the survey were asked to describe their experience, this is the word that came up: nightmare. Not a challenge, not an inconvenience, a nightmare. And a huge part of that feeling comes from just being caught completely, totally off guard. You see, this lack of knowledge sets off a terrible chain reaction. First, you're not prepared for the symptoms, so they hit you by surprise. Then, because you were never taught about it, you have no idea how to manage them. And the result? A severe and completely unexpected blow to your quality of life. And we're not talking about minor annoyances here. We're talking about symptoms like totally debilitating hot flashes and chronic insomnia. I mean, things that can completely wreck your ability to work, to sleep, and to just feel like yourself. Okay, so as if that's not enough, there's another layer of difficulty here. Even if you start to suspect what's going on, the signs can be incredibly confusing. And this is the third thing everyone needs to know. The symptoms themselves are often really ambiguous, which makes getting any kind of clarity a huge challenge.
Now, a really important word to understand here is perimenopause. This is the whole transitional phase leading up to menopause, and it can catch people completely by surprise. Sometimes it can start years before their periods actually stop for good.
And this is what makes it so tough. Perimenopause symptoms can pop up out of nowhere, and they can look exactly like the symptoms of a dozen other health conditions. That ambiguity can leave you feeling totally lost and confused about what's happening inside your own body. So we've got this huge education gap, really difficult experiences, and super confusing symptoms. The natural next step is to start looking for clear answers, right? But here's the thing. That search itself is the problem, and that's our fourth key takeaway. The information landscape out there is basically a minefield. That knowledge vacuum we talked about earlier, it gets filled with a ton of misconceptions and just plain wrong information. It's not just that finding good information is hard, it's that bad information is absolutely everywhere. So this becomes the million-dollar question, doesn't it? In this sea of noise and misinformation, what are you supposed to do? How do you find reliable, expert guidance that can actually help? Well, the answer is to turn to dedicated experts, people like Professor Kate Clancy. She's a human reproductive ecologist and an author. And this leads us to the fifth and maybe the most important thing to know. You don't have to figure this out alone, but you do have to actively seek out credible, expert sources to cut through all that confusion. So let's just quickly recap the path we've walked here. First, we identified the problem, this massive, widespread lack of education. Second, we saw the real-world impact of that, the negative consequences for health and life. And that leads us directly to the third and most crucial step, which is the solution, seeking out credible answers to finally get the essential information that everyone deserves to have. So let's just end on this thought. Imagine a world where that 90% statistic was flipped, where the 5 things we've just talked about weren't some huge revelation, but just common knowledge. Understanding these basics, the education gap, the high cost of being unprepared, the confusing symptoms, all the misinformation, and the need for experts, that's the first step in preventing those nightmare experiences. And you know what? That would change everything.